and welcome to today's episode of Authentic Achievements, where it's my absolute delight to be joined by the fabulous Laura Cardwell. Laura, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. We are going to have a good time.
Oh my goodness, we so are. And as you've just found out in the green room, we could get into a conversation really quickly. So before we do, for the audience that might not have had the chance and the pleasure to meet you yet, let me share a little bit more about you. So Laura is an intuitive business coach, author and speaker who blends science and soul to unlock human potential. With advanced training in applied neuroscience, energy medicine, quantum concepts and human design, she helps purpose-driven leaders, entrepreneurs and creatives break free from burnout and build joyful, sustainable success. Laura is the co-founder of Embodied Leadership by Design and creator of Neurocohesion, a transformational method weaving human design, applied neurology, and the 5 elements. Away from her work, she loves being near the water, moving to hip-hop beats, learning something new, or curling up with Murder, She Wrote. You can't beat a bit of Murder, She Wrote.
You cannot. She never lets me down.
No, absolutely. That is a shared guilty pleasure. But apart from our love of Murder, She Wrote, so many interesting things in your story and in what you do. And I love the balance of looking at things from all those lenses. So acknowledging that, we are a little bit like an onion. There are many layers. And if we want to understand that, we need to look at those layers. But could you bring it to life a little bit more for us?
Absolutely. It always sounds so kind of official when you read it like that. It sounds, but really it's been a lifelong journey of unpacking what, like, the deeper holistic approach to becoming, right? So I started off as an applied neurologist, which is a type of energy medicine that specifically works with the brain and brain pathways, nervous system regulation, fight or flight responses, lots of ADD, ADHD, anxiety, depression, just working with the electrical system of the brain. And I'm a brain nerd. That might come up more than once. I think the brain is one of the most fascinating. It's just a miracle, right? It's just literally a miracle. And so in doing that work, though, I found that I was really missing some more context. So you're just looking at the electricity basically of the brain and saying, is this working or not? But often what I was coming up against again and again and again was that there were deeper subconscious belief systems that were running the programming, old stories, conditioning that we don't really have access to. So, I could go in there and say, well, you're in a fight or flight response, but unless I could really name why for that person, or we could really start to gather context for what needed to change, I found that people would just kind of be back on the table in another week, kind of the same problem again and again and again. And I found that to be true in energy medicine across the board. When we look at energy medicine, when I say that for your audience, I mean things like Reiki and acupuncture and sound healings. And that's anything that's working with the vibration to help you shift your energy.
Yeah.
A lot of the times the practitioners were fantastic practitioners, but with no context going directly to the person who was getting the healing, then they were not really able to be a participant in their own healing. And it became something like kind of like a medical model made out of energy medicine. Like, I don't feel well, I go to you, you do a thing to me, I feel better, but next week I don't feel well again. And it's because I've had no participation in it. And so that drove me to want to learn more about kind of how I helped people understand what was out of balance and why. And eventually that led to deeper, I have a very, very, very varied background in lots of modalities, and kind of just starting to weave them together in an integrative way. 5 elements work, which comes from Chinese medicine, is deeply part of that. But I still felt like I was missing I found that ultimately what I was really helping people with was returning to self. And that's how I ended up in kind of more transformational work. I mean, that's also a long story, but it was like, we just kept having to have these conversations about like, who am I underneath all of this conditioning and these disruptions and the stories I'm telling myself about my wellness or not wellness. And I just found that we were missing a piece. And so human design, which is like an archetypal system for people that don't know, it's kind of based in archetypes, and just the archetypal level became kind of this moment of real clarity for me. And it was the last piece of putting in an integrative system where it's like human design is not a big list of boxes of who you are, it's how you are. And it helps you return to who I want to be. It's my purpose. And my purpose is not necessarily what I'm here to do, although that's a result. Your purpose is who you being. And then from that being, why you be that. And then from the why, what you do. And so that's kind of reverse from how we typically talk about purpose. And so that's kind of how I ended up with this integrative model of using human design. Not necessarily, a lot of times with human design, it's similar to astrology. People just get a reading and they learn a bunch of stuff about themselves, or like take a Myers-Briggs test and they learn a bunch of stuff about themselves, but they have no real integration of that. They don't really know what to do with that afterwards. They kind of put it on a shelf and it's done. And so, so for me, it was taking that model, taking those archetypes, helping people understand that, and then using all those other tools to help them look at where the shadows might be, look at where the conditioning might be, so that they can live more of themselves and more on purpose. So yeah, that's kind of how it all comes together.
Oh my, I think like you, I think the human brain is just the most interesting thing. And the fact that we only use about 10% of it, you think, oh my goodness, how much untapped potential is there in there? But I know from some of the work that I've done, we carry with us, don't we, those stories from childhood, those statements that we make about ourselves, that if we, as I understand it, we kind of we make them at the age of 7, we enforce them at the age of 14, and we embed them at the age of 21. And if we don't go back and look at them, then we're running on out-of-date software. And I always liken it to my phone. I'm 52, so I would be running on 31-year out-of-date software. And would we let this? We wouldn't. The second it comes up, software update. I mean, Neuroscience.
There is no update. There is no update anymore. You're not even being updated.
I just need to keep going. And so that kind of spurred me to start doing more reading, more understanding, more trying to work through kind of like, how do you take that journey inward? And for me, I'd love your thoughts on this, because this is what you do. For me, that was a big breakthrough moment when I realized that the answer was within, not without. So I'd spent so long like being a course junkie. I've trained on more things than I care to admit to anybody, or reading all the books, or like putting it all together. And it wasn't until the breakthrough moment of going inward to see what's in there that shouldn't be anymore, what's in there that no longer serves, what's in there that perhaps it was a misconception in the first place, wasn't actually based necessarily in any reality. And how do I free that up so that I can step into whom I'm supposed to be? So how do, for those listening and watching, how do you take that first step?
Oh my gosh. How much time do we have? No, I'm kidding. I want to say just quickly to what you just said is that movement from the tendency to be in the mental, the tendency to want to learn it externally, I call that the aha moment. I think we all call it the aha moment. We read something, we got this deep insight, but the journey from aha to what I call, oh, and I mean that like, that's kind of when it starts to integrate into your actual beingness, it often comes with a little bit of like, oh, that means I have to do this differently, like it's, so there's this journey, right? And I want to say, to answer your question, part of how I got into everything that I do is that I was actually studying perception, and how the brain perceives and what the brain perceives and how that guides how we think, and then how we move emotions, how that is attached to our feelings and the sensations in our body, and then ultimately our physiology and our gene expression, right? We now know that there's a golden thread that ties all of those things together. And then all of that can be sewn together with quantum physics if you want to explain it scientifically. And so I was studying perception, and part of my work, it was in applied neurology. A lot of it was like, you're just working in this pathway. You're not really questioning why you're in a pathway. But there was this pathway that kept coming up when I was working with, especially when I was working with women in midlife.
Mhm.
And it kept coming up, and it's called the seeking system. It's one of our 5 primal emotional systems. And like fight or flight, like it's one of those kind of primal emotional circuitry. And I'd been taught in class that it was like, it's the motivation pathway to go find food. That's all I ever really thought about it. But as I began to really question, like, why is this happening for all of these? It's the same pathway every time for these women. I began to understand the pathway goes from the brainstem, starts as a motivation pathway, starts as like the spark that gets us going, and it organizes all the muscles necessary for us to go get food and shelter, and it's motivation. As it gets into the more limbic or emotional areas of the brain, it actually becomes the pleasure and reward system.
Okay.
And so they work together. Like, I'm motivated to go eat, and then the pleasure and reward adds reward for eating the thing that's going to be, sustain you the longest. That's often fat and sugar. So, and then we add context, like it's grandmom's pie, it's all that kind of like, so we start to add this emotional context, and that circuit right there, that motivation, that actually becomes what we would call drive, right? It's like we end up in a world chasing that cycle, chasing some sort of dopamine reward for doing the thing. And this is hustle culture. This is the thing. No wonder it's showing for so many women, because it was always blocked. And it was like they were just hustling and hustling for that next gold star, for that next achievement, and they just weren't feeling it. They couldn't feel it because they were just, that's what happens with the dopamine pathway, is like, in the beginning, it's very sensitive. But if you overuse it, it takes more and more dopamine for you to actually feel it. That's how addictions happen. And so as I'm studying this and I'm watching, like, and when it's blocked for women, it's usually blocked because of shoulds and coulds and woulds and guilt and shame. And, it's like, and so then I was like, okay, but so then what is the antidote to this cycle, right? That's external. Like we just said, it's that external experience. And I found that the same pathway continues up into the cortical areas. And as it goes through the more higher cognitive areas, it actually becomes creativity and curiosity. And as it becomes creativity and curiosity, it actually demands of us that we ask why. And inevitably, once we ask why, we have this kind of primal, but why am I here? So it's literally, it becomes this soul-seeking pathway of like internalized, I'm going to go inward. It drops back into the body. And so it was really interesting, because as it does that, it actually adds a whole cocktail of other other neurotransmitters and neurochemistry that help bolster that dopamine, like serotonin, which regulates our mood, and oxytocin, which creates bonding. And so, and what it really means is, if I'm just chasing dopamine, I might feel rewarded, but I don't feel satisfied. But as I add in this oxytocin and the serotonin, I am adding a richness to my experience that creates satisfaction, this deep soul satisfaction. And I want more of that, because that feels really good. And so we're literally programmed from the brainstem up to the cortical areas of the brain to seek our deeper meaning, or to seek nourishment on the physical, emotional, and spiritual level. It's all the same pathway. And that just blew my mind when I really started to put all of that together. It was just like that big aha moment, right? And then the of like, so it's really about starting to seek that internal guidance, that internal moment. And I think the first step in that, I think we often start with something external. We go find a person, we go find a coach, we go find a therapist, we go find a book, we go take a course, or at least those are all the things that I do, right? But I would say that then the very next thing that has to happen is to be contemplative with what you learned. and contemplation uses the right and left brain, and it begins to integrate in the body and not just in the mental field.
Wow, it's fascinating how it all fits together, and I love that it kind of comes back to curiosity. Two of my big areas, particularly in leadership, for me at the moment, is I think the next iteration is going to be leaders who are curious and present, because we're losing the ability to do both. And actually, whilst I was writing my book, which is on that, I found out that a quote that I grew up with, I only knew half of. So I was brought up with the quote, "Curiosity killed the cat," and I didn't know there was any more to it than that.
Me neither.
And yet the actual quote is, "Curiosity killed the cat and satisfaction brought it back." So it's curiosity killed the version of itself that it was, but the satisfaction and what it learned and what it grew brought back the next version. It totally changes the game.
Yeah, totally does. And I had never heard the other half of that either. So thank you.
Oh, I always say, but for me, it kind of like sums up kind of what you're talking about. Is we've held ourselves back against something we believed to be true, and we don't go further. You know, as children, we are born with such curiosity. I mean, the whole world is about us, and we're curious, and we seek to understand everything. And then we're taught not to be too curious, to color inside the lines, to stay inside. But we don't know, or rather, people like you do know, because you've done the study, the impact that has long term. What is that blueprint that we are creating? And you know, for me, I've got a little girl, and one of the things that I've tried really hard to do is make sure that she doesn't become attached to a label. So I'll say things like, you know, you're not naughty. Your choice might have been a naughty choice.
Yeah.
The beauty about choice is you can make another one straight afterwards. So if you made one that didn't work quite so well for you, you know, did something else, then you can make something else. And you know, it always makes me smile when your children use your words against you. So I was coming up the stairs the other day, and the dog jumped at me, and I nearly fell down. And I went, "Oh, you silly animal!" And she immediately spun round, put her hands on her hips, and went, "Mummy, he's not a silly animal. He made a silly choice." And I was like, "He did? Yes, he did."
That's hysterical.
I guess for me, the reason for sharing that is I'm trying as best I can to make sure that some of those labels that become that blueprint aren't there, so that we don't use them. Are there other ways that we can help not only ourselves but also our children to not create an inner story that they're going to need to recover from?
I do think, I mean, I always think that, and I say the same thing actually. Recently, somebody said, if you could tell the leaders, like, what's the one main quality that makes great leadership, my answer was curiosity. Because when you're curious, you're open-palmed, you're open-minded, you're willing to be in a place of listening. And what it really brings about is a place of being able to observe. And when you observe, you have the ability to navigate different perspectives that you might not have been if you weren't curious, or if you weren't without curiosity, we tend to close down. And so I think it opens the door. Curiosity always opens the door, and then it opens the door to openness. And now my beliefs are that openness is a place where we can connect into something that's much bigger than ourselves. That is, you know, I believe in a universal energy, and that there's something bigger than just me. And I have some experiences in my life that led me to know and experience that. And so I think that openness to something bigger than myself, even if it's just a perspective, even if it's just I'm open to something, like it's that curiosity that says, where did this thought come from, and whose is it? You know, like, where did this emotion come from, and whose is it? Because so much of 95% of our life is what happened yesterday, or the day before, or the day before. And like you said, all the programming set from the first 21 years. So is it really a thought that you're having, or just a thought you've been programmed to think again and again and again, and you've just taken it on as yours? Or is it really your emotion? In human design, we talk a lot about, one of the things I love about human design isn't just about who I be, it's also about how I interact. And that's one of the things I really love, because so many archetypal systems really give us a document about ourselves, but it's not about me and other people. It's just about me. But human design gives us this this depth of like, first I know me, and then I know how I interact with other people, and then from there I know how I can serve the whole. And so it's really multi-layered like that. And but in that, what we learn is like, immediately in some of the structures of the way that some people are designed, it might not be their emotion. They may be an emotional empath, meaning they're taking in the emotions of people around them. And if they've never questioned that, they often think they're angry, they have self-doubt, they're anxious, they're depressed, like they claim it as their own. And then they create, once once the brainstem claims an emotion for itself, it creates a story to lock it in. And so, observation allows us to question the story. Like, is it a story I still want to have? And was it mine to begin with?
Oh, I love that, because I constantly question myself, particularly as a coach. One of the things that I was trained on was, you should have a purpose for when you're talking, because it should be them that's talking. So I constantly ask myself, why am I speaking now? What's the point of the purpose? One thing that I often will say is, what's happening and what am I making it mean? Because we know that our emotional brain responds 24 times faster than our thinking brain. So very often when I feel myself having an emotional response, I have to remind myself to question what's actually happening. And then what have I made it mean? Because if not, I'm over here in a flurry of emotion. And the reality is something very different often. And it is, isn't it? It's how do we give ourselves pause to understand that, so that we can actually then make the right choice? Because if not, that's why there's disagreement, because something's happened and both people have made it mean something else. So that's why there's always three versions of the truth, isn't there? My truth, your truth, and the actual truth. who can't attach those emotional bits to it. But I love that whole. Actually, it sounds like with the work that you do with like human design, and that it's not just about telling you what's gone wrong. I'm going to liken it to traditional consultants. They come in and they tell you what's gone wrong, and then they leave.
And now you're just a mess.
You're like, great, like you say your baby's ugly and then walking off. It's like, what am I supposed to do with that? Whereas actually, it sounds like what you then do is turn that into and here's the implementable plan to transform that. Here's things you can do, steps you can take to deepen your understanding of you, both who you are, how you are, and how that impacts, so that you can then be, I guess, back in the driver's seat. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think what, you're pointing to something that in my early years, I was just an energy practitioner, right? And so, like I kind of said, I wasn't applying any meaning to what I was finding. And that was, part of my journey was to discover, like, how do I add meaning to this? But what I found when I started to cross that bridge was that in the energy modality realm, there's amazing practitioners. They don't necessarily know how to ask a really great question, right? They don't really know how to assign that to change. And I do believe that we do not heal someone. They are healing themselves, and we are part of the process. And if we do not give them what they need to heal themselves, then we are just moving energy that feels good for a little while, but it isn't transformative. And so, and it isn't sustainable. It's going to come back. The same problem is going to come back. And so I found in the energy medicine realm, we weren't really asking questions. We were just doing. You're doing what we were trained to do. And then as I found myself doing more coaching, and that kind of happened for me during COVID, my clinic was closed and deemed non-essential. And I started kind of working online more. And in that online space, I kind of found myself more in coaching, because people weren't quite ready to have a conversation about distance healing. And I was like, yeah, we'll talk about that later. Let's just I'm just going to do it while you talk, it's like, but so I kind of backed my way into coaching. And I found, as I got into that realm, a lot of coaches didn't know how to move the energy of patterns that were going to repeat themselves. And so their clients were finding themselves in repetitive patterns because there was actually an energy blockage. And the energy medicine were finding themselves in repetitive patterns because they hadn't really connected the dots. And so I found that blending, moving the right energy at the right time with the right question, and then adding in that map that we have of human design was like gold. It was like real alchemy was starting to happen. I just saw everything really click in, and it really changed the results my clients were having. But it also, I guess for me, it hit that higher cognitive pathway where I really started to feel deep satisfaction in the work I was doing, and not just feeling really frustrated that somebody kept coming to me and wanting me to heal them. And that wasn't, I couldn't, because I can't, I can offer you the tools I have, but you're ultimately the one doing it. And that felt really superficial and shallow to me. Not that energy medicine is superficial and shallow, just I think I was in that dopamine. You can get addicted to healing somebody. Therapists get addicted to fixing somebody. We all have a little bit of fix it dopamine. And I get that, I've been there. Ask my husband. He's like, I think you're addicted to trying to fix me. And I'm like, I am. So it's fine. So.
At least you know.
At least I know, right? But my work felt really dissatisfied with it until I realized what I really needed was that watching them make the transformation and just doing the right energy medicine at the right time. When I saw like, ooh, we've got some switching where the body has one story and the brain has another. And that's not going to go away. It's going to continue to play out for you again and again and again. But if we do this little bit of energy medicine while we're talking about it, you're actually going to be able to change that pattern. So I can't remember why I was telling you that, but it was like that blend of those two things really.
I love that, because I think it is. It's that moment of the fact, as human beings, we've got different styles of learning. You've got the kinesthetics, the auditory, the visuals. And so being able to look at things from more than one lens means that actually you make it more accessible for all, because you're going to hit on their learning style. And, I've always thought as a coach, my job is to make myself completely and utterly dispensable through competence. So actually, if you still need to come back to me regularly, I'm not doing my job, because actually what I've not done is pass the wisdom on. I've not taught you how to do it for yourself. And so, yes, some people might still want to stay in touch every now and again, but they shouldn't need to keep coming back to be fixed. And I love that, that's at the heart of kind of what you're doing. I can't believe how fast time is going, Laura. There's so many things I would like to say, but I'm very conscious that I know you've recently released your book, haven't you? Unstuck Yourself.
It is actually its birthday.
Find your true purpose.
Yes, it's its birthday today. It's actually in the world as of right now. And so, yes, this book is co-authored with Megan O'Malley. She's who I founded Embodied Leadership by Design with. And we wrote it because it was the book we knew we needed. It came out of our own learned experiences. This is not a book written from the podium as someone who knows everything and is going to teach you. It is a deep, kind of gritty, in the pit with you journey, returning people to their purpose, because I strongly believe, and Megan does too, but I strongly believe that burnout, we're at record highs of burnout around the world. It's not just in the United States where I am, but it's like, around the world. And I believe that is not just a physical, emotional, or mental issue. It is a spiritual issue. We are missing that deeper why, and we are stuck in that dopamine cycle of chasing something instead of attracting something. And so that's what the book is really about, is returning you to your purpose so you can really heal that deeper meaning.
Amazing. I can't wait to read it. And happy first month anniversary to the book. I hope you're really proud of that. I can't believe where the time's gone, Laura. But could you share with the audience how people can get in touch with you and who you help?
Absolutely. So in general, I mainly help women in middle age, generally around perimenopause and menopause, um, and helping them heal burnout through listening to that inner wisdom, returning to that inner intuition. Often around that same time, we are being driven to ask deeper questions like why. I believe that menopause is what we call in Chinese medicine a second spring. It's a new becoming, and it's an awakening, not a crisis, even though it feels like a crisis most of the time. And I have lots of jokes about it. So that's mostly who I help is women who are feeling burnt out in that middle age period of time. And I do that through one-on-one coaching and retreats. And so some sneak peeks. It looks like 2026, we're going to have some cruises for our retreats. So that's very exciting. It looks like, I don't know yet, but things are coming together. So they can find out more at lauracardwell.com, and they can find the book there, or they can find the book at unstuckyourselfbook.net.
Amazing. And for anybody who didn't scribble down that fast enough, please don't worry. It is just in the show notes below. So please do check that out, check the book out, and connect with Laura if you too would like to find your inner purpose. Laura, it has been such a delight. I could chat to you all day. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insight and your wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been so fun.
It's been a pleasure. And to everybody listening and watching, I hope you found today's episode to be as insightful and inspiring as I have. And until next time, take care.